Black women, feminism and film production. I'm a feminist filmmaker who wants to see more women in front and behind the camera, simply because I think the world we live in is fascinating and diverse, and it's in no way represented on our screens. To achieve this diversity on screen, we need to diversify the people behind the camera. I make films with and about women whose accomplishments are global, as well as those whose achievements, although as inspiring, may not be as far-reaching. I work with women to create films in which they are centre stage and who stand in their power as self-determining subjects, rather than passive objects. In filmmaking, the word subject is often used to refer to the person being discussed. Subject can also be used to denote someone who is being dominated by someone else. For this reason, I call the women who share their stories with me on film storytellers with a capital S. To confer their importance. The problem with this is that story can have connotations of falsities, but for now, that's the word I use. My definition of feminism is being against all oppression and working for social justice and transformation, individual and societal. Everyone's human rights must be upheld. Women, men, boys, girls, refugees, Afghanistanis, you and me. As a black woman, I have a personal connection with black women, and no, it doesn't mean I don't connect with men or white folk. It simply means that I'm passionate about issues that affect black women. I understand that where discrimination based on race, gender and class intersect, the effect is a triple whammy. Most of the women I work with in making films of their stories tell me that they want other women to know what they went through. They want women in similar situations to know that they are not alone, that there are solutions and that things can be different. Their wish to relieve women of the oppression that they themselves experienced makes them feminists. Of the women whose stories I've made into films, Caroline wanted other women with obstetric fistula, the medical condition that occurs when a woman has a prolonged obstructive labour, and that results in tears and rips so that you're basically leaking constantly. Caroline, she wanted women to know it can be repaired. In Kenya, one woman who I can't name lived in the informal settlement Mathare, one of the largest temporary settlements in Nairobi with 500,000 residents. Her situation was unusual in that she had been able to confide in a friend about her unwanted pregnancy. Somehow these two women managed to pool enough money to pay for a safe abortion. In Kenya, 7 women die every day from unsafe abortions, so this probably saved her life. Her message to women was simple: there is a place where you can go and have safe abortions. 3 of my main challenges as a feminist filmmaker are: 1, to tell the story of the woman I'm working with, not my story. I see myself as a channel for the storyteller to tell her story, whilst I also act as a mirror so that she may see herself. I can't pretend I'm not there. I operate the camera, I'm the editor, and often the interviewer. 2, to work in a way that deepens the viewer's understanding of the storyteller's essence, the way she experiences the world, and to convey this in a manner that is dignified, humane, and true to the storyteller's subjectivity. 3, to make films in a manner that is empowering for the storyteller. Today, I'll share with you a bit about my filmmaking process, some of the associated pitfalls, and how I try to overcome them. I grew up in Trinidad and Tobago, where the majority of people are black and brown, and I had light skin. I attended a government-funded school for girls with some of the best grades in the equivalent of the 11+ exam. The limitations I have faced in life have been more a consequence of my having a vagina than the colour of my skin. As a girl, I came to understand that outside our home, there were gendered expectations of women. As I became older, I experienced undesired attention from men who expected me to give them my attention. Every single time I walked into town, men felt entitled to comment on my body and my existence, as they did other women. On the days that I ignored them, their lewd comments became abusive and often homophobic. Why did women have to experience this sexist behaviour? Like many, I discovered I was black when, aged 11, I came to school in the UK for a term. However, later in my 20s, I learned from a white Irish woman that I was friendly with that I wasn't really black. She'd been in court on racist charges, so she knew what black was. In Trinidad in my early 30s, our housekeeper, whose skin was lighter than mine, informed me that I was white. Last year in Kenya, the dark-skinned housekeeper where I stayed called me Mzungu, the word for a white person. I showed her the photographs of my black father and my white mother and asked her why she called me white when my father's black. She laughed. When I relocated to the UK in 2015, I'd go to lots of black events. Often the people I spoke to seemed interested when I said I was a Trini. However, their interest waned when I told them I'd arrived just 6 months before. It was as though it had been assumed that we had a shared experience, only to find that the assumption was now that we hadn't. These varied concepts started me thinking about how the intersecting characteristics of race, gender and class are cultural constructions that vary with geography and time. When I came to the UK to study documentary, I realized the representations that I saw on screen rarely conveyed this complexity. I began to think about the ways in which black and brown people are represented in the media, usually by other people. I wanted to see a variety of complex and nuanced black women on screen. Working as a development practitioner on environmental initiatives in Trinidad, and in particular as an action researcher with the Institute for Gender and Development Studies, this equipped me with the language and tools to better understand how differently women and men, girls and boys, experience the world. This is an example of one such difference. In 2 farming communities in Nariva, which is the largest freshwater wetland in Trinidad, men wanted more water for their crops, whereas the women wanted clean water for their newborn babies. The combination of my Trini and UK experiences led me to start considering the ways in which black women are represented in development, and how I, as a filmmaker with a development background, can use my privilege, my skills and experience to support them to empower themselves. The Jamaican British cultural theorist Stuart Hall wrote about the ways in which cultural identities are similar and different, and about cultural identity and cinematic representation as being positioned in a particular context. Hall wrote, "We all write and speak from a particular place and time." His description of his position included his childhood and adolescence in Jamaica, his adulthood in England, and his being lower middle class. Walking through Mathare, Nairobi, I must have seemed other. I certainly felt other and vulnerable as a lone, light-skinned foreign woman loaded up with a backpack full of expensive equipment. These words of Hall resonated with me. Vis-a-vis the developed West, we are very much the same. We belong to the marginal, underdeveloped, the periphery, the other. Being raised in the post-colonial society of Trinidad and Tobago gives me a certain familiarity with other English-speaking post-colonial societies, like Kenya. My first-hand experience of the complexity and constantly changing perspectives of people and their relationships makes me well placed to use filmmaking as a tool to unpick and convey the constructions. I use filmmaking to, in Hall's terminology, reposition us black women, bringing us from the margins to the center as self-determining human beings negotiating challenges in the world we live. Attempting to reposition the women storytellers I work with requires a constant repositioning of myself so that I can align with them and almost channel their story through me. I can't pretend that I'm objective, but I can align my subjectivity with theirs. I do this by choosing topics about which I'm passionate and choosing clients with shared interests. I've made films on female genital mutilation, obstetric fistula, disability, and my experience of being single and child-free at 47. I start from Hall's politics of position by becoming more self-aware and being open to learning about the women I will be working with. What's her experience of the world? How has it shaped her? I try to put myself in her shoes to truly understand her position, the way she experiences it, so that I can convey her voice accurately. My experience of different people helps me to understand that my belief system is only a construction and it's only real to me. This helps me understand the belief systems of the women I meet, even if they aren't my own. This, doubled with choosing to work on projects about which I am passionate, helps me achieve this objective. But, by the nature of being human, it must be imperfect. For example, I believe women over the age of 18 have the right to choose to be circumcised. However, I don't condone violence, and I'm against all circumcision of girls and boys, so I'd be unlikely to make a film that promotes circumcision. Participation plays a key role in the filmmaking process towards repositioning. The attention is on the storyteller, who is given center stage, and to emphasize the importance of her story and of sharing. Together we research and learn through conversation, becoming transformed by the end. At its best, the interaction between the storyteller and myself changes both of us in some way. It could even be described as action research in that we're both active. The storyteller reflects and in turn makes me reflect and respond. When filming, I use inconspicuous equipment and I make it clear to the storyteller that she leads the filming, that she is in charge of where the conversation goes, what she wants to talk about or not talk about, whether she wants her identity protected or not. It's her story to tell in the way that she wants. In this space, she has the power to decide. She also has a say on the final edit. Recently, when filming, one of the women's description of the minutiae growing up black helped me understand her life experience as a black woman in the UK in a visceral way that I'd never felt before. I wondered whether my interactions with women with whom I do not share a common language, or women whose English vocabulary is modest, limits the quality of our interaction and thus the final film. This woman was highly articulate with an extensive vocabulary. English is my native language and I am fluent in Spanish. English is the only language in which I have a love for the precision of words and rely heavily upon them. But how much is lost in translation? How much of the communication during filming is unspoken? Do I sometimes misrepresent or misconvey the stories of the women who are less verbally articulate? The chances of misrepresentation are reduced the more the women storyteller is involved in the filmmaking process. Making the film Caroline and I spent a couple of hours in conversation, but we had no subsequent contact due to geographical and technological constraints. Caroline did approve the film before it was publicly screened though. In making Becky, it was different. The conversation between Becky and I lasted a couple of hours, but Becky and I shared an apartment for a week and the film was edited over a 2-year period. Over this period, Becky and I became friends. On WhatsApp, I would ask her, when you said this, did you mean this or did you mean that? And I would send her versions of the edit and she would provide feedback. Becky and I connected in a way that Caroline and I didn't. Becky participated in a way that Caroline did not. Consequently, Becky is, I think, a more complex film and it's won some awards. Did Becky and I connect because Becky had tertiary education and has travelled in Europe and worked in other African countries? Was it because Caroline and I had less in common? I'd like to think that it was the geography and the technology limitations rather than any inability of mine to understand her reality that prevented us from connecting in the way that Becky and I did. But is that really true? Laura Mulvey coined the term male gaze. This term describes the fact that in a male-dominated industry, it's the man who writes a script that determines on-screen action, a man who moves the camera, a man who directs the film. So what the audience actually sees is a gaze that's created by men. Spectators see women as passive objects, while male actors are seen as active decision-makers driving the action. The women in the films I make are not passive props or objects used by men to advance their storyline. They are subjects who act. They are complex human beings who shape their lives and face their challenges with agency, and they have successes and failures just like the rest of us. They are not the other. The camera is used in a way that places the woman in the center of the frame. She is the master of her world, whatever the outcome, a world we are privy to witness. The focus is on her face, her expressions, and she's not sexualized. It's all well and good to make films of black women's lived realities. However, this opens up the question of film distribution, so that these films are seen and have a chance to change the status quo around issues pertaining to social justice and subverting the invisibilization and marginalization of black women. Distribution is a huge limitation to spreading the word of the black woman in the films I make who demonstrate, according to bell hooks, an oppositional gaze. That is, one that involves political rebellion and resistance against the repression of a black person's right to look. A gaze that says, "Look at me, ain't I a woman?" Thank you.